Hello, and welcome to today's webinar, Leather Impact Accelerator, LIA 0.1 Launch and Pilot Year. Today's presentation will be recorded and sent out to all registered participants and also will be posted on the Hub. We will have a Q&A portion at the end of the presentation. You can type your questions into the question box on the webinar doc. Any unanswered questions will be answered afterward via email. Now on to Anne Gillespie, Director of Impact Acceleration with Textile Exchange. Anne?
Thank you, Rose, and welcome everyone. We are very, very happy to have arrived at this moment to launch the first version of the Leather Impact Accelerator, and really happy to have you here. So I will get straight into it. The agenda, very broad level agenda here. We're going to start with our welcome and introductions. We'll look at what the Leather Impact Accelerator International Working Group has been doing, and then a quick look at LIA. I think a lot of you have already been involved with many of our previous calls around the Leather Impact Accelerator and should be quite familiar with the details, and it is certainly all available online. And then we're really happy to have a special guest, Charlton Locks, who's based in Brazil, and he's going to talk to us about the program that he's doing that's feeding into the Leather Impact Accelerator and the impact incentives. We'll talk about how to participate, some next steps, and probably the most important point is we'll be opening up for a Q&A so we can hear from you. So next slide. We'll start with our antitrust statement. Textile Exchange convenes the textile community and values diversity of views, expertise, opinions, backgrounds, and experiences. It is expected that members of this community will collaborate by sharing ideas, information, and resources of publicly available information only, and avoid discussions on price, strategic plans, or other private and sensitive information. And as Rose said, we are on a Zoom webinar. This is not a Zoom call. So if you want to communicate with us, it's by using the Q&A button to ask a question or to leave a comment. And we'll be monitoring those as they go through. Some of them may get answered in the Q&A box, and some of them will address through the panelists at the end of the call. And I wanted to start the whole webinar just by stepping back and looking at what Textile Exchange is about. I'm pretty sure you all know who we are and what we do, but we have a very strong vision that we've really just developed in the last year. And that is that we envision a global textile industry that protects and restores the environment while enhancing lives. And by 2030, we aspire to guide the textile industry to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 45% from a 2020 baseline. So this is huge. It's a very big, hairy, audacious goal. It's going to take all of us to do that together. And it really feeds into the work that we're doing with the Leather Impact Accelerator. And I think we've got a lot of opportunity to help meet this goal through leather. As you would have seen in some of the previous webinars, leather is a very big contributor, well, through the cattle in particular, is a very big contributor to the greenhouse gas footprint. You can argue what degree should be apportioned to leather versus the beef, but the bottom line is we've got a really big opportunity to make some change, so we want to take that. And there's our fearless leader, LIA Pepper. She's not on this call, but she's been closely following all this work and is really pleased to see where we're at. And hopefully we'll have good news to report to her over the year. Next slide. This is the indomitable team. I'm just going to go through everyone quickly because I think most of you will have met or communicated with one or more of us. We have Nicole based in Paris, who's chair of the Leather Production Committee. Deborah Taylor has been her co-chair, particularly when Nicole was doing very important work, giving birth to her little daughter. Larissa is the one who holds us all together. She's based in Belarus. Anna Heaton, who's done an outstanding work on the Animal Welfare Committee, and she's based in the UK. Stephanie is based in British Columbia. She's kind of a part of the brain trust on the Impact Alliance, or so the Impact Incentives and Leather Impact Accelerator. I'm based in Quebec, in Canada as well. Josefina Izel, who is been leading the deforestation work, is based in Argentina. And our famous guest speaker is Charlton Laux, who's a COO of Produzindo Certo, which is connected with Alliance de Terra, and he'll tell us more about his work. And I want to say a huge, sincere, deep, warm thanks to all of the companies who have contributed financially to our responsible leather work overall. The money that you have really generously donated to us has helped us do this LIA work. It had various names and structures and forms a few years ago, but it's really led us to where we're at now. And it's also helped us bring up the entire understanding and awareness of the issues and opportunities among the whole industry and all the various stakeholders. So I hope you are very proud of the role that you've played. And I also want to say a huge thanks to all of the individuals who've attended these calls. I mean, it's your engagement and involvement and attention that's creating the value for all of this. And it feels like the Oscars here, but I do have to say a huge thank you as well to the people who've just donated incredibly generously with their time, their experience, and their expertise for the Scope Committees. I won't go through all the names because there's quite a few, but this presentation will be shared, and I hope every one of you has taken some satisfaction and pride in the work that's been done, and please know that we're incredibly grateful. It's been, it's the ultimate group effort, I'd say. And a few facts and figures about the International Working Group. We have over 647 precisely individual stakeholders within the IWG, and of those 39 are voting members. So these are the people who had voted and allowed us to go forward with LIA. They also had to sign the charter, and it was a fairly serious commitment to do that. And in 2020, we've had a couple of webinars, and we've had a number of meetings giving progress reports, and then countless on the side committee meetings to get us to where we're at. Next slide. And I should have found a YouTube for the drum roll, but we did have our vote. It finished right before Christmas. We slid it in before the Christmas holidays. And yes, we had a resounding yes to all of the documents in the LIA. We gave people the opportunity to vote only on specific documents if that's all they were confident or to comment on. But most people voted on the whole core set of documents, and it was a unanimous consensus. Now, we definitely see this as not a full-scale endorsement. We understand that there are parts of LIA that are still going to have to get further developed and thought through. And that was noted by a few of the people, but it's definitely gives us the ability to now move forward. And this is what we need to do. We need to start working with LIA, piloting it, understanding, are those little points that we've quibbled out about over a year, can we address these and make them better? So it'll be a good year in 2021. So on to the Leather Impact Accelerator itself. So this is a diagram that we use to show the whole picture of the different elements. We've got the deforestation conversion-free protocol that applies to any of the farms or animal systems, the animal welfare benchmark, which also includes the slaughter stage, the leather production benchmarks, which address social and environmental, the impact incentives that connect the brands back to the farms, the claims framework, which really deliver the value to the brands and hold the whole thing together. And then we've got traceability guidelines for the two parts of the supply chain. So next slide. This is what it looks like in real life. And this is the 4 core documents that were voted on. There's, as you'll see later in this presentation, there are more documents that are involved, but these are the 4 ones that we're going to take a look at now. And I also want to say a word about this being version 0.1, not version 1.0. And that's because we're considering this the pilot year. And this is a protocol that is being adopted by the standards work within Textile Exchange, and we're using it with the 0.1 for LIA. So in this year, we're going to start the implementation of all the components of LIA. The impact incentives can be traded and claimed. Everything's going to feel like normal, and any work that people put in to get themselves benchmarked or to buy the incentives will count. And then throughout the year, we're going to be paying really close attention to gathering feedback and results and reviewing them. And then at the end of the year, we're going to look at what kind of changes and tweaks do we need. And if it's really big ones, we're going to come back to a full stakeholder engagement process where there'll be, more input and opportunities to give feedback and even more voting if needed. So that's how we're going forward. Next. So I'm going to let the team members talk about the different scopes. Josefina, are you able to speak?
Yes. Okay, for the DCF, the Deforestation and Conversion Free Scope, as Anne said, we had set this criteria on the committee. That was an international committee with people from all different regions and countries. So what's in there is that we have used accountability frameworks definition to define what zero gross deforestation or conversion means. So we have all in that guidance, that definition. So only the farms that meet that definition can be part of the program. We have set a minimal threshold area for minimal deforestation of conversion of 1 hectare. That means that there can only be some conversion in 1 hectare that usually is for roads or different type of minimal conversions at the farm level. And the cutoff date is January 1st, 2020. We also have applied the regional cutoff dates, like for example, there is one in the Amazon or in the different countries, like in Paraguay also they have a regional cutoff date. So if that's earlier than the one that we have set, we will use that regional cutoff date. So that's a quick overview of the DCF.
Great, thank you. Anna.
Thanks, Anne. Yes, so this is the animal welfare benchmark, which is slightly more complicated than the deforestation. As you can see by the slide here, there's several options within the animal welfare benchmark. And this is really because we're trying to, we have developed this benchmark, which needs to be able to be applicable to cattle production across a wide range of different countries, systems, climates around the world. So we couldn't have just the single animal welfare benchmark. So the baseline is really the minimum level of animal care that we're expecting from farmers. And in an ideal world, everybody would already be doing this anyway and be under a certification that does this anyway. But this is the level which we say the requirements to some may seem quite basic, but we know there's farmers in the world who aren't certified or aren't actually achieving these levels now. So this is the one where it's critically important to at least bring people up to this level, because these are the animals that are the highest welfare risk. And then building from the baseline, we go up through options 1, 2, and 3. 1 and 2 are sort of improved animal welfare measures across all the 5 domains of animal welfare, so across different aspects of cattle management, but still being applicable to the vast majority of certifications that are covering the different cattle farm farm systems. At these levels, with regard to specific requirements on space and thermal comfort and any sort of animal management operations like castration or disbudding, the living environment portion at these options still could involve confinement in feedlots or in housing for part of the animal's life. But as I say, there are these other requirements built around that. And then option 3 is the sort of grass-based system for life. So this is the sort of the highest level of animal welfare, those certifications that are really focused on the best possible practical animal welfare for cattle. So the aim now is to move forward, working with certifications to see which options they fall into. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Anna. It's been quite a work. Okay, social, Nicole.
Hi, thank you, Anne. Yes, so the leather production scope is, as Anne showed you earlier, it covers all the leather transformation stages between beam house and leather finishing. And so we've got 2 subscopes to it, the social one and the environmental one, which are both covered by standard benchmarks, like just as the animal welfare scope is. And so for the social scope, it is based on the SSCI benchmarking requirements that was developed by the Consumer Goods Forum. And it covers, well, you know, most of the typical areas that are covered in social certifications today. So social policy, legal compliance, forced labor and child labor, freedom of association, fair treatment and discrimination, health and safety, building safety, wages, working hours, grievance mechanisms, and business ethics. Yep.
Great, thank you. And Deborah on the
Hi, everyone.
environmental.
Hi, nice to be with you all. First of all, it's been really a great couple of years working on this project with the team. You know, 2 years of discussions, and it's good to see it finally reach this pilot stage, so that's great. And as Nicole was saying, sitting alongside the social benchmark is the environmental benchmark for the leather production part of the overall system. And this benchmark has been based on the bronze level of leather working group that was ultimately decided to be the most comprehensive but basic level that we would expect a tannery to be achieving to meet this scope. Other certification programs can also be equivalent to this system. And if anybody wants to be benchmarked for that equivalency, they can put themselves forward. As an overall guide, we're looking at the primary risks involved in the leather production scope. So alongside your general facility details and operating permits, you're looking at your environmental management system, your restricted substances and chemical management, energy consumption, water usage, those natural resources that are being consumed, the emissions and pollution, air and noise emissions, waste management, effluent treatment, and of course emergency plans and housekeeping are very important. So they form part of the environmental scope within the overall LIA. And I think that's it for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Deborah. And I have to say, it was really complicated to translate the LWG bronze into something that could act as a benchmark for other standards. So huge hats off to Deborah, to Nicole, and the team that helped her out. So thank you. And I'm going to speak a little bit about the impact incentives. I've certainly spoken about it many, many times, but this is the quickie view. But when we started off this work, in fact, the initial driver for the Leather Impact Accelerator was brands coming to us saying, we want Textile Exchange to develop a solution that will allow us to address animal welfare in our leather supply chains. And then when we went through the process of stakeholder engagement, we got a lot of feedback that we needed to address other issues, which is also the deforestation, and then the social and environmental benchmarks of the processing stages. But when we started to look at the whole supply chain and how incredibly complex and opaque it is, we realized that a typical chain of custody system or a full traceability system not only was going to be prohibitively expensive and long to install, but it was in many cases absolutely impossible. There's parts of the supply chain there's no connectivity from one step to the next. So we developed the impact incentives model that effectively allow us to leapfrog the whole supply chain and allow brands to deliver their impact back to the beginning of the supply chain through the impact incentives. So if you go to the next slide. The other evolution that we developed as we started to work on the impact incentives and ultimately form the Impact Alliance, which cuts across multiple different commodities, was the idea of the impact partnerships. And when we look, if you look at the graph up on the upper left side, you can see that in some cases we'll have farms that meet the minimum thresholds for our scopes, and they can just trade the impact incentives easily. But there might be groups of farmers that meet some of the requirements, but not others, and they need support to be able to meet those threshold requirements and also just to get themselves organized for verification and so on. So to that end, we developed this impact partnership model where brands can work with an on-the-ground partner program that will in turn be working with a group of farmers to, first of all, give them training and support to meet those thresholds. They can help with setting up the verification, the data collection, getting those farmers ready to invest or to sell the impact incentives. And they may also help with things like micro investments, loans, etc. And in some cases, even pass some of that incentive onto the farmer to reward them. So brands can purchase those impact incentives from the program partners as they're bringing those farms up to that level of practice. And then once the farmers meet it, they can sell those impact incentives directly, and brands can support them as well. So it's very flexible and it's very powerful. The idea is that we want to move as many farms through these programs to get them up to that level of best practice and maybe ultimately to higher levels of best practice. And so we set a maximum amount of time that a farmer can be part of the partnership program through the incentives of 3 years. Yeah, so next slide. It's going to walk you through an animation of how it all works. We start with a farm. The farm will be verified. If you click again, there'll be a third party, typically a certification body, that will verify whether the farm meets the requirements of the scope for the impact incentives. They will also check the data. We have a number of questions that we want the farms to answer, and they'll verify that they're complete and accurate. And they'll also check that the farmer is participating in a traceability program. It can be as simple as branding. The preference is RFID ear tags. But we want to build traceability into the overall system so that over time, brands can have fully traceable supply chains and actually make product claims. So then the verification body will be the one to register the impact incentives onto the trading platform. The other scenario we have is there'll be a group of farmers, like that partnership model that I was talking about, that may not yet be able to meet all the requirements. So they will then work through the impact partnership model, again, with third parties that will verify that either the criteria, well, the data and the traceability requirements are being met, and that they're making the progress towards those goals. And then again, that third party will register onto the platform. So the platform basically houses the data, the impact incentives, and then these get passed through to a facilitator who plays a really kind of critical role in helping everything happen smoothly and effectively. So the incentives and the data reports will go through the facilitator, who will then pass them on to the brands and retailers. And the facilitator really works in between the brands and the farmers to connect them and be sure that help the brands find the farms that meet their needs and vice versa. And very importantly, they facilitate the flow of cash. So it's very difficult for brands to be buying impact incentives across multiple regions of the world and multiple currencies. They help with the timing. The brand might want to pay in 1 month, but the farmer needs to be paid in 2 weeks. So they deal with all that, and they can help set up more longer term, even contractual relationships between brands and impact partner programs. So once the incentives have been purchased, the brand can make a claim. This is where your value comes through. It's your progress towards your sustainable development goals, your own internal CSR goals. And there's great opportunity to tell stories, because unlike other credit trading systems, you know the actual story. You know who the farmers are, where they are, and you've got a lot of data about the impact they're delivering. So the other data that comes out is a shared data that cuts across all of the different commodities that are being traded through the impact incentives platform, and aggregated data for regions. And we can share that with other NGOs, governments, various third parties. I think it'll be really powerful for driving and recognizing change where it's happening. And all of this is supported by the Impact Alliance. The impact incentives turned out to be such a good deal that a lot of people wanted to join in on it. We currently have our founding members, Textile Exchange. We're doing impact incentives for leather and cotton, GRSB for beef, Global Food Partners for cage-free eggs, and Proterra for sugar and soy. We have about 5 other organizations that are also interested in joining us. So I think this is starting to pick up a lot of momentum. Okay, next. I will pass it on to Stephanie.
Sure, thanks, Anne. So here's the LIA Claims Guide, and this is part of the complete LIA package. It really brings together all of those different components that we just took a look at in the previous slides. And the Claims Guide offers companies guidelines on how to communicate about their work with the program. So this guide aligns closely with the new Textile Exchange Standards Claims Policy that was released at the end of last year. And in it, there are 3 main categories for making claims about LIA or impact incentives. So those include general marketing claims. So this is really about the corporate commitment that brands can make for LIA. Assured claims, so claims that can be verified by having gone through the standards benchmark approval process, being certified to one of those approved standards, purchasing impact incentives, or other areas. And then the last category are informational statements, which are statements that provide details about certain aspects of LIA or impact incentives, and provide information about how each of those components work. Oops. So here's the LIA Corporate Commitment, which gives brands and retailers the opportunity to make a public commitment to LIA and set targets associated with 2 specific areas. So you can see down at the bottom there are 2 different modules for the LIA Corporate Commitment. The first one is purchasing impact incentives, and the second module is committing to mapping your supply chain and ensuring that your leather production supply chain is certified to LIA approved standards. So brands may choose to participate in one or both of these modules, either simultaneously, one after another, or just completely separately. But both modules include a requirement to report progress towards these commitments on an annual basis through the Textile Exchange Corporate Fiber Materials Benchmark. And so here's a look at the full collection of the LIA documents. The first 4 you see here are the core LIA documents that we just spoke to. We've got the farm scope in the first 2, and the leather production supply chain scope in the second 2. And finally, the LIA Claims Guide that I just spoke about on the previous slide. In addition to that, we have the 2 benchmark approval process documents that standards would go through in order to be benchmarked to either the farm level animal welfare standards benchmark or the leather production environmental or social standards benchmarks. And In addition to that, we have several supporting documents, including a verification manual for the farm level, a leather production supply chain mapping and traceability guide, a document that further details the LIA corporate commitment that I just spoke about on the previous slide, and finally, one master LIA document guide that describes the different user groups that, that may participate in LIA and which documents apply to them. So all of these documents are available on our website, leatherimpactaccelerator.org. So you can be sure to check them out there or let us know if you need help finding anything. I know there's a lot of different documents and information to navigate through, but you can be sure that there's something for everybody in this LIA program. And yeah, with that, I'll hand it back to you, Anne.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was an enormous amount of work to put all of that work that we've done over the last 3 years into a coherent package. So hats off to you on that one. And now we're going to go to LIA in action. And this is where it really gets fun. So we have a pre-recorded presentation by Charlton, and but he is on this call, so he will be available for Q&A at the end. But we just wanted to address any potential connection issues. So we did the pre-recording. So go ahead.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank Textile Exchange for the invitation and opportunity to present our LIA pilot project. That presentation is structured in 3 topics. First, to introduce you Produzindo Certo, which is the company that I work for. Second, I will present the ranges pre-selected for the pilot, and then the expected outcomes of that pilot. Well, to start properly, I want first to introduce myself. My name is Charlton Locks. I am Brazilian and the current Chief Operation Officer of Produzindo Certo. I am an environmental engineer and work for a little bit more than 15 years with sustainable agriculture. I'm also a small rural producer here in Brazil. Now, let me speak a little about Produzindo Certo. We start our operation in 2004 as an NGO called Aliança da Terra, and in 2019 we become a private company. The company mission is to help producers to improve sustainability into their farms and help companies to establish a clean supply chain. But how it works? We are usually hired by companies to evaluate and provide sustainable technical assistance to all farms in their supply chain. We have a team of sustainable agriculture experts which visit each one of those farms to evaluate its sustainable level. We put all that information in a report that's present to the producer. After that presentation, our team helped him to create an adequacy roadmap. So in the end, we have a property with a social environmental diagnosis, a roadmap, and we start to monitor the farm evolution during the time. The company can better understand the supply chain risk. But the big difference of our work is we are not here to audit farms. We want to help producers to improve their farms, and we are constantly looking for better market opportunities to our network of verified farms, as LIA pilot project. Just to give you an idea about our work, we have more than 1,300 farms, which cover almost 6 million hectares into our platform. Vast majority of the farms are located in the middle of Brazil, which is the main egg production area of the country. But we also have some properties in other countries of Latin America. As we evaluate each property in detail, we have a huge amount of data of it, and it allows us to quantify sustainability in a more pragmatic way. As an example, we have more than 2.2 million hectares of preserved forest inside those farms. They store more than 1.5 billion tons of carbon, and more than 20,000 people work in a good and safety condition. So, 3 examples of sustainable metrics. Just to let you know, our checklist has more than less 200 items. All that information is registered in our digital database system in the cloud, accessed by registered producers and clients, and with artificial intelligence to monitor automatically all those forms. Now that everybody knows who we are, I will explain why Produzindo Certo joined the LIA Impact Incentives. And the answer is simple. It's because we believe on sustainable credit system to boost social environmental improvements on rural properties. It is an effective way to the brands support directly the producers with no middlemen to increase the transaction cost. I spent years helping multi-stakeholder groups to create standards for sustainable production. I also help a lot of producers to reach those standards. And in the end, what we have is just a small number of big ag companies certified, and the vast majority of small and medium producers out of that system because of the costs. The burden of sustainability is too heavy to be supported only by producers. The entire supply chain needs to help. That said, I would like to present the ranches that need help to become even more sustainable. As one of the objectives of a pilot project is to check the feasibility to scale up, we select ranches with different characteristics to evaluate the grip of LIA requirements. So we have small and big areas located in the 2 different Brazilian biomes, Amazon and Cerrado, with different level of technology adoption. All those properties are already registered at Producing Right platform, and I will show in the next slide some numbers of them to you. The first goal of LIA Impact Incentives is production with zero deforestation, obeying regional cutoff dates when applicable. To monitor it, Produzindo Certo already mapped all vegetation inside these 5 properties. The quantity of forest ranges from 32 hectares to more than 13,000 hectares. And in the end of the project, this whole forest will remain standing. Maybe a little bit more will grow, considering that reforestation process can occur in some areas. But as you can see, the project will not be only forest focused. We have other important indicators as carbon stock, well-managed pasture land, and fire prevention. The second goal is animal welfare certification, which is not common in Brazil. Just to let you know, it's so unusual that we are talking with some certification companies to adapt international animal welfare standards to Brazil reality, because we didn't find a complete and applicable standard which matches LIA benchmarking until now. But as Produzindo Certo already has some animal welfare requirements in its protocol, we already have some information about the situation of these farms. I can say that there are still adjustments, especially in the animal management infrastructure that needs to be improved to these farms met LIA requirements. Well, the 2 big outcomes expected are zero deforestation and animal welfare certification. But we want to go further. As Producing Right platform already pushed its producers to demonstrate continuous improvement, we will support and measure that in the pilot. To illustrate what social environmental improvement mean here, we can mention adequacy on infrastructures, control pollution, be diligent on chemical use, protect the ranch from fires, take good care of his employees, etc. All of these requirements are evaluated by Produzindo Certo expert team, and we summarize it in a social environmental score for the property. For now, the average score is 87.4 in a scale 0 to 100. But in the end of the project, with brand support, the score will be probably higher. Well, just to conclude my presentation, I would like to reinforce that the most ambitious outcome of this pilot will be to consolidate a financial structure capable of directing the efforts of rural producers towards even more sustainable agriculture and cattle ranching. So count on Produzindo Certo and its ranchers to build it together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlton. That was fantastic. So we're now it's time to take action. And this is a very brief overview of how the different players can participate. And hopefully everyone on this call and many more will start to engage with us. So if you're a brand or retailer, there's a few different ways you can start. One, start by completing the corporate fiber and materials benchmark to understand what your leather usage is. You can contact Textile Exchange. We'll point you in the right direction. It's all available on our website. It is a free resource and it will give you a ton of insight and information, not only for leather, but other materials. Making a corporate commitment is a very powerful way to get started. As Stephanie said, it can be about the impact incentives, about mapping your supply chain, or even better, both of them together. And then contact us about a pilot. We're going to be working in the next week or so to really structure out how those pilots are going to go forward. We've been kind of dabbling around and it's been difficult to get the pilots going while still trying to fully develop the impact incentives and LIA, but they're both now officially launched, so we're ready. So it'll involve sourcing from LIA approved farms or suppliers, purchasing impact incentives, or again, ideally a combination. If you're a supply chain member, we just encourage you to use LIA approved standards. Now there's a bit of a chicken and egg thing there because we haven't approved them yet. So the only one that would be de facto approved is the LWG bronze. But contact your standards bodies, encourage them to get benchmarked with us, or contact us and we'll reach out to them. And then work with the brands to map supply chains, to implement the traceability systems. And when you are working with all the approved standards, contact us and we'll put you onto the LIA webpage. For farmers and partner programs, as Charlton was saying, you need to figure out what standards and verification systems you're going to work with, encourage them to get benchmarked to LIA, work with the verification bodies to register the impact incentives. And again, we're welcome to other groups to pilot with us. And as I said earlier, standards just need to contact us to get that benchmarking process started. We're ready. And in terms of what to expect from communications, we have a schedule. It's obviously not set in stone in terms of dates, but we have a rough schedule that we'll be communicating out around LIA and the responsible leather work. So with LIA, we have a mid-year update where we're going to come back and present on what progress has been made so far with the pilots, what we're learning, and probably ask for some feedback and input on to what direction we need to be heading or what else we need to be looking for. And then quarterly, we're going to be having responsible leather roundtable meetings. So these are outside of LIA. The roundtable is really now pivoting to focus hard on how do we meet the Climate Plus goals. So using LIA and the impact incentives will be a very big part of that, but there may be other bits of work that we need to throw into there. And then we're also planning some really kind of rich recordings to share with you. There's some videos that we want to share. We will be putting one together with hopefully with NWF, National Wildlife Federation, to talk about forests in South America, and they've got some amazing resources to explain what's happening down there and where the opportunities are. And then we're also looking at how do we work together for collective action on pain relief. So that will be coming out along with some other ones as we see the opportunities. And on the hub, the Textile Exchange hub, it's just the perfect place to come in and share information. We send a lot of information out that way. It's a good way to connect with us, access resources, etc. Okay, and next slide. We are now at the Q&A section. So before we get into the Q&A that are in the chat function or in the webinar, I wanted to just start with a few questions for Charlton. So Charlton, you did an absolutely excellent presentation. So I'll ask you to unmute yourself and answer a few questions that I think a lot of people will be asking. And the first one is, how can LIA prevent deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon and Cerrado?
Hi, Annie. Can you hear me?
Yep, beautifully.
Okay, great. So thanks again. Man, how weird is to hear myself in the computer. Sorry, everyone, for that. Okay, so let's move to your question. It's an excellent question, Annie. So, the answer is simple. So for the first time, these farms will be paid for protecting the forest, right? So there's never been a real incentive for farmers, mainly in Brazil. There's a lot of information about payment for environmental services, certifications, but farms in general don't receive any compensation or recognition. But they need that. This can represent a great example for other farmers to follow LIA and see for the first time something concrete that they can have access to. So we are creating a new path for rural producers. So they can see the LIA farmers as an example to be followed.
Great, that makes a lot of sense. So what about animal welfare? How does that fit in terms of delivering actual improvements?
Well, as I said before, animal welfare isn't an issue for Brazilian farmers from now. So they never receive training, or they never see market signals related to animal welfare. Just an example, my company, Produzindo Certo, supports 2 major retail groups to ensure a sustainable beef supply chain. To that, a few years ago, we create with them an animal welfare checklist. And when we compare our previous checklist with LIA benchmarking, it becomes evident that we will have to go into this topic much further. So by joining LIA, the farmers will receive training and will invest in improvements. And it's not cheap. The investment is high. Just to give one example, if you want to change a coral for an anti-stress system, we call anti-stress coral, it costs at least $20,000 to $30,000 to make the adjustments. It's a lot of money. So that huge investment can be partly be covered by LIA credits. And again, training, it's an important thing to those producers. So training, like in human livestock handling, can be also covered by LIA. So improving the capacity of the rancher's employee to deal with the cattle. So in the end, we are bringing the latest trends in sustainable production and test it in real medium-sized farms. So if we can do it happen on those properties, we will probably can scale it up.
Great, that's very good to hear. So the last question I have for you is, what is the LIA impact for the Produzindo Certo project?
Well, we already support farmers on sustainable practices. As I mentioned, we have more than 1,300 properties in our platform, improving social environmental performance year by year. But with LIA, we will raise the bar, right? So we will create a group of excellence in the Producing Right platform. So to that group, deforestation is not allowed, even if authorized by the government. And animal welfare assessment will be more rigorous, right? So they need to be certified in a animal welfare standard, which attend minimum the baseline of the LIA benchmark. So that's what I think LIA will help Produzindo Certo, and how Produzindo Certo will help producers to achieve the LIA standard.
Great, thank you. We'll stay online. We've got a few questions that have come in through our attendees. I'll start with the first one from about impact incentives. Are they focused in Brazil specifically, or are they piloting in other leather manufacturing regions? And the answer is they are truly global. We've started with Produzindo Certo because, first of all, it fully fit everything that we're looking for, and Charlton has proven to be a very patient and tenacious partner as we've tried to work through everything. But it is open. So if you're a brand and you have a leather sourcing region that you want to be working with through the impact incentives, say it's South Africa or Europe or whatever, let us know and we'll start that work of trying to connect through to the different farms. Josefina is also working with a global roundtable for sustainable beef. So we're hoping that through those connections, we can feed into some of the work that they're doing. The next question was, can you clarify the parameters of the pilot program? Any specific qualifications on business volume? We don't have a direct answer to that. I know that particularly in the beginning, there's quite a high cost kind of at our side, and actually more than anything with the facilitator to get these projects going. So we're going to be looking for a certain level of volume. I hope to be able to give a better answer to that after we have our big meeting about this on Friday. So we'll look for a way to communicate that and follow up. Next one, thank you for the great overview. Will the impact reports issued by the Impact Incentive Trading Platform include KPIs such as those that Charlton mentioned, hectares of preserved forests, saved carbon, etc.? So the ones that we're going to be generating overall, I think what we'll be focusing on in the beginning is to define the data that we want to collect across all of the impact incentives or all LIA, regardless of which program it is. So for generic aggregated reporting, it'll probably be those core indicators. But then if a brand is buying from Produzindo Certo, PC can choose to upload all that data and the brand can choose to receive that, or a brand may even say, we also want some information on how many workers you have or children or whatever. So there's a lot of flexibility to build out the data. The other thing is that we are looking to expand the number of scopes within the impact incentives. So we have the practice-based scopes, which is what we currently have, deforestation, animal welfare. We're looking at how do we also bring in kind of impact-based scopes, which would be those measurements of biodiversity value, carbon stock, etc. So I'd say watch this space. We'll try to keep evolving this. And then Charlton, the next question is for you. So someone's very detail oriented, said there does not seem to be a direct correlation between the size of the farm and the amount of sequestered carbon. For instance, Teles Pires is smaller than, I'm not going to say this right, Yatoba, but it seems to have a higher figure for captured carbon. Could you explain that?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the question. The indicator that we present is the amount of carbon stock stored in the forest, and we have a difference in the vegetation structure from Jatobá and Teles Pires. That's why even having more forest, the property has less carbon one compared with each other. So depends on the structure of the forest. As we mentioned before, we have properties in the Cerrado and the Amazon, but between those two biomes, there's a region in Brazil that we call a transition forest, which has some species from Cerrado, others from rainforest, and we have different ranges from carbon stock at these forests. I don't know if it's clear.
No, that's great. I think we'll go on to the next question. Actually, I'm going to jump to the last one, then I'll come back to the final one. There's one that we get all the time, which is what is the cost of impact incentives? And the answer is it depends. The pricing, the impact incentives is really set by supply and demand. So it really comes down to an agreement, and this is where the facilitator plays a role to look at, from produce incerto, what is it worth to the program and the farmers to make the changes to meet the thresholds for animal welfare, or to keep those trees standing and to not cut them down. And then on the other side, it's going to be what is it worth to the brands to demonstrate support towards their CSR goals. And I think over time we'll start to get a kind of a sense of what different incentives cost for different scenarios, but I think they'll always be quite variable. I would expect that there should be higher demand and higher value for those high impact areas like the Cerrado and the Amazon, where there's high carbon stock, high risk, etc. But it will really, really depend. So please come in with an open mind and the willingness to kind of work to find out what your specific price discovery is going to be. And then another question, are the more granular KPIs that were shown something developed independently by this pilot, or are they built in the impact incentives framework? And they were, the ones that we saw really come from Produz Incerto. It's not from Impact Alliance. Our KPIs are, some of them are covered, like amount of preserved forests, and we've got some other farm data questions around overlaps with high risk and high carbon stock areas. The number one thing that we're looking at from an environmental standpoint is the polygon or the map of the actual farm, so that we can overlay that with those heat maps of high risk, high carbon stock, high biodiversity value. And then we also have some questions relating to animal welfare. And then the other comment was often deforestation can occur by companies who clear the land and then lease it to farmers or ranchers. Is there a way that impact incentive help prevent this, since the deforestation isn't done by the ranchers themselves? And yes, the impact incentives, the DCF protocol applies to any land that is owned or managed, or essentially used by the farmer. So even if they're working on leased land, that the cutoff date and the deforestation requirement still applies to that land. So I'm realizing we're just a few minutes short of the top of the hour. Are there any last questions? Oh, sorry, I see another one. Will impact incentives be aligned to external initiatives like the accountability framework? Absolutely, yes. The definition for DCF has come straight out of the accountability framework. And in every possible opportunity with LIA, we've looked to existing external systems or frameworks or definitions so that we could leverage the work that everybody's already doing and kind of drive that industry alignment towards common goals and common systems. So the other thing is we're talking with a number of other organizations. There's the Gold Standard, there's land scale and other reporting initiatives, so that we can help feed into their systems and they can feed back into ours. So it's somewhat infinite on that account. So I think that's it for the open questions. If you can go to the next slide. So I had to be sure everybody saw this slide. First of all, the contact details. You need to get in touch with us, lia@textileexchange.org, and then we've got the website. And I also want everyone to know that this calf was born on our farm. My husband is a farmer just an hour away from here, and we have soy, cattle, soy, corn, hay, and now cattle. It's a very recent thing. And this is the first one to be born in 2021, and we have officially named her Leah in honor of the Leather Impact Accelerator. So thought I would end on that one, and thank you all for your time, and pass you on to Rose.
Thank you to our speakers, and thank you for participating in today's webinar. As a friendly reminder, an email will be sent to all registered participants with a link to today's presentation. That concludes our webinar. Thank you. Goodbye.